Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're tuning in from for today. We are live with the European Gaming Quarterly Meetup. This is the Q3 Meetup, which is happening in September. It's a pleasure to have you all here. We are already live on YouTube, and it's great to see so many of you joining us on Zoom. Today we have two sessions. The first session is focusing on the recent updates of the European regulations, and it will be moderated by Dr. Simon Planzer, who has some awesome guests who I'm happy to see here today. So Simon, without any further delay, you can start your session, and then we'll just take it from there.
Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. Very nice to have you all attending our breakfast presentation, quarterly regulatory update. Very pleased to see my colleagues on the panel, and we understand we also have our audience ready to get rolling today as well. I'll just briefly mention who is with us today. We have as our very classic and very competent guest in the very first place, Dr. Joerg Hofmann, who will certainly tell us about Germany and the regulatory situation there today. We also have Charmaine Hogan from Playtech, who is head of regulation with Playtech, and I understand who will tell us today about regulatory trends that she can identify in her practice, so not just limited to the UK, where she works for her work. Then we have Andrius from Gabnys.Gabniene, law firm covering the Baltics notably, and I understand Andrius will tell us many interesting things about the Baltic region then. And finally, last but not least, we have Odette Nestor. She's a former regulator in Romania, and now with the national trade organization of online operators. So again, welcome. Very pleased to have you all here. My name is Simon Planzer. I'll be pleased to also tell you a few things about Switzerland, notably, where currently there is a licensing process going on. So I would say, Joerg, would you be happy to give us a first crunchy insight into Germany and its regulatory good news and headaches?
Good news. Well, hopefully I've got some. Very happy to do so. Good morning, Simon. Good morning, everybody else. It's a pleasure. Starting with Germany, it's September 2022. That means we are in the middle of a process of major changes here in Germany. The first sports betting licenses are about to expire by the end of this year. They have been granted for the first time, the first 15 in 2020 in October under the previous interstate treaty. And since there's a new interstate treaty in place as of 1st of July in 2021, we need to renew these licenses. Currently, in the so-called whitelist, you can find 34 operators being obtained with a sports betting license, and they need to renew it. This takes place at the very moment. The responsible regional council in Darmstadt is working hard on reviewing the license documents and is going to send follow-up requests to the operators. So we are quite optimistic that this will happen in time, meaning before the year is over. On the other hand, we have pending licensing proceedings for virtual slot machines, which is the term that is allowed for the old term online casino. You're not allowed to use this again. That is subject to a specific license granted by lenders. But what we understand a casino to be, meaning virtual slot games, that is subject to a pending licensing procedure. In that whitelist, we can read 9 names of operators who already got a license. There are more in the row. I expect that in the end, there might be plus minus 50, 55. So that is the amount of applications pending at the authority, which is the state administrative office in Halle in Saxony-Anhalt. This authority is responsible to guide through the application proceedings until the year is over. Then we will get a new super regulator, the joint gaming authority, which will take over responsibility for all gaming verticals interesting for the private industry. So virtual slots, online poker, and sports betting. Online poker application proceeding also pending at the moment. No license being granted so far. This will take place hopefully within the next couple of weeks. They're really busy working on these proceedings. What else can I tell you about changes? The joint supervisory authority will take over responsibility as of 1st of January, but they already took over responsibility for enforcement against illegal gambling and advertising illegal games of chance. This happened on 1st of July. So no longer the Ministry of the Interior in Lower Saxony is responsible for IP block for payment blocking. That's all now subject to the enforcement tools of the new regulator. But that's the only task which they already took over. Everything else is coming up. So the transition up to January is the most important challenge for German regulation. And I'm sure we will talk about this later, about challenges and issues that are coming up during this period.
Absolutely. Wow, fascinating. Many things happening. Also a puzzling number of regulators that are doing handovers with actually some overlapping competences, it already seems, or overlapping at least in terms of timing, right? You already mentioned that the new super regulator has already taken over some competences. So we will be very happy to look into this further. Thank you very much for this brief overview, Joerg. And that would then bring us, let's say, to Romania with Odette Nestor. We would be very curious to hear from you what has been very recently going on, and also possibly what you see in the forthcoming future.
Hello from Romania, and thank you very much for this invitation. I'm so sorry to say that Romania also have a lot of changing, and I suppose that is the worst scenario. But after I hear about Germany, I think we must be very happy. So this is like in life, you know, if you compare, you are very disappointed. If you analyze, you will be very happy. What can I say? In Romania, we didn't expect any changing in this summer, but in one day, in July, in beginning of July, some political experts start to discuss about to increase some taxation. About any other markets, but also they discuss about the gambling. In the beginning, we say all of us, we consider that this is just populism, will not be in the legislation. But after they start to discuss very serious in next 2 weeks, we find out that we have already one ordinance, what will be approved in one day from government. So what was the changing? What we have approved already, what it's applied and what is enforced now. We have increased the taxation for withdrawal for the players. What before for the online, I'm talking now, it's before was 1% from withdrawal. So for every amount what is transferred in the bank account, and now it's increased to 3%. From 1 to 3%. Also, we have some changing in the license and authorization from the operators part. I'm talking now. Before the taxation for authorization was like 16% from GGR, including also bonuses, what means around 19%. And now the taxation, it is after the changing, the taxation become 23, what is very big difference. Still, we hope that we can change some things because the ordinance are going now in parliament for the procedure, the legislation procedure is going in parliament in this autumn, and we are trying to amend a little bit or to find solution to change some things, because also in this ordinance we have some non-compete I can see between online and retail. Because in retail we have the authorization taxation what before was same with online 16%, and for them was increased to 18%, and for online is 23%. If we analyze it a bit, we can see that the same game in the retail is tax. It will be the tax with 18%, but with the same game in online will be 23%. What I think it's very clear that it's not legal on the competition side. So this we are trying to have like arguments on the parliament and to try to push it a bit to explain our arguments. And if not, our association will go for sure, will go in court, and also will do all the diligence on the Brussels, on the European Commission, and to non-compete authority. This is the situation now. So the ordinances, the changing are in the place. So everybody is paying this taxation in this moment. Nobody disappeared from the market. Still it's fair to say, still is business with 23. But we'll see what will come in this autumn, because for sure for some small company will be very hard to pay this and to make investment, and also to spend a lot of money in the marketing, because like you know, Romanian market is a very competitive market. So we are waiting to see in autumn what is happened, and I will update you with all the changing what we'll have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for Odette for this very concise brief overview. I've already taken some notes and will be very happy to revisit some of the points you mentioned. I would then like to move to the Baltics before we hear from Charmaine some overarching observations in the industry. So Andrius, what can you most importantly report from the Baltics, if you can pick out just a couple of most relevant points?
Okay, so hi everybody, and nice to meet you all as always. Okay, so if only the relevant ones, I'll skip with the you know, the general part of what's going on in the industry in general. So or I can briefly run through each of the jurisdictions, like taking only a few minutes.
If you allow, Andrius, just to reference to the audience, I think most in the audience are loyal followers of our quarterly meeting, and that's why they're very likely to have already a general overview of the general situation in the Baltics, and that's why I essentially invited to bring the points that you currently see as most.
Okay, good. So in this particular case, we can go straight to Lithuania then, because Estonia is really stable. Latvia is really stable as well, even though they talk a lot about changing the legislation, but it keeps stable state. In terms of Lithuania, there are lots of changes in Lithuania applied or enforced from the 1st of July this year. So it's only two months. These changes currently everybody is still waiting for the effect. Will these changes have decent substantial effect to the market? So it's not still a bit unknown, but the changes are essential for Lithuania, because Lithuania was well known for land-based presence requirement, which was there from 2016. So Lithuania abolished that, and there is no land-based presence requirement from the 1st of July 2022. So the legislator changed that to a hefty license fee, similar to the Latvian model, which now in Lithuania is a €500,000 one-off fee for remote gambling. So basically, what was done, the legislator introduced for the first time the real license fees, because prior to that, the license fees were meant only to cover the administrative work of the personnel. So basically, it counted up to €2,000 or something like that for the application, for the terms and conditions approval and stuff like that. Now it's from 100,000 to 1 million, depending on what activities the operator is intending to go for. So for the audience, the online side of the business is mostly important. So I will not cover a lot the land-based part. I'll go straight to the remote gaming. So for any operator, yes, yeah.
If you allow, the 1st of July change, did this already happen in 2022, or is it foreseen for 2023?
22. It's already in force for 2 months. I guess July, 2 months and a bit. Yeah, so
exactly. That's a big move. That's a big move because it was criticized as being contrary to EU law. Right?
You're right. So obviously it was not done in a week, So it was known from last year, September last year, autumn last year. And so it entered into force. So what does that mean? So any operator which would like to enter Lithuanian market can now opt for a licensing regime without the requirement to set up a land-based network by paying $500,000 of one-off license fee. The other parts of licensing requirements, they didn't change. So basically, a remote gambling operator would still need to have a €1,158,000 of share capital, which is a bit of a Eastern European tradition to have it as a share capital. This requirement is both, in all of the Baltic states, in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. It's in all of the Baltic states, it's around 1 million. So in Lithuania, it's 1,158,000. So basically around 1 million. But the requirement for the land-based network, which was a hefty requirement and a bit of a unlogical one, is abolished. So basically, any operator who wishes to enter the Lithuanian market can pay €500,000, set up a company which does not require to be established in Lithuania. Obviously, if it's not established in Lithuania, it's a bit of a there are requirements to have it outside of Lithuania, but still it's possible. So this change was done by reversing the licensing procedure from remote gambling permit to remote gambling license. Prior to that, there was no remote gambling license. The licenses were only by a type of gambling that you do. So basically a casino license, a betting license, a totalizator license, bingo license, and stuff. So now they introduced or reversed the online gambling permit to a separate license. So an operator is not obliged to have a land-based license anymore. So this is the main thing. The other. So it's a sort of a good move, even though the hefty fee is, it depends on the appetite of the operator, but still it's logical at least. The other thing which is not that good is that they raised the tax rate to make it a flat rate for all the gambling activities except of lotteries, and they increased that to 20% GGR. So now it's from the same 1st of July 2022, it's 20% GGR, which in comparison So let's say the general European framework is more or less okay. It falls within the regular brackets. But if you would take into account that it was 10%, then 13%, now 20%, and everything happened in around 2 years, it's a big increase.
That is, of course, a lot. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Andrius, for this first overview. I see that Charmaine is already eager and antsy to jump in and share her observations. So I don't want to hold you any longer, Charmaine, and very nice to have you here today with us. Please.
Hi, Simon. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's quite interesting to listen to already like 3 countries, right? Or 2 countries and plus the Baltics, and see the many changes just there. Then take that into the wider Europe and all the markets, and you see how many changes we actually have coming in constantly, and where you stand as a supplier, as an operator, having to comply quite quickly and make your case for all those markets. If I start here with the UK, and it's by no means unique to the UK, the public policy objectives have not changed, right? So if we look at the UK, what are the objectives of why you're regulating and why the regulator wants that oversight, which is, keep out crime, ensure gambling is fair and open, and protect the vulnerable. So those still hold. But what you have in the UK right now is this review, which we've been waiting for a while. Hopefully with the recent political changes, finally there'll be some direction, because there is at the moment arguably uncertainty with all that's going on, because there's this anticipated review, but at the same time you still have the regulator who has to get on with their own job in supervising the industry. And since the review was first announced, there has been quite a few changes at the top. I think at least 5 at the very top level. So, it begs the question, are those people who started off with the review back in 2019-20 still there? Does that document still hold? And that's kind of a political debate on its own in reality. What you have from the regulator's side is this ongoing consultations, ongoing expectations on the industry, and heightened expectations. For a number of years now, we've seen changes coming in when it comes to player protection and safer gambling, as well as advertising. What I think we're seeing more recently is that really enhanced the focus from the regulator and expectations on the social responsibility side, as well as on what they see as AML failings. And in fact, earlier this year, the chairperson of the regulatory authority actually said that we can expect that they would up and significantly increase sanctions where they find that there are persistent failings when it comes to social responsibility and AML findings. And in fact, we have seen fines being dished out. And at the same time, you have industry who's trying to keep up with the forthcoming changes and provide from their point of view their expectations and their experience and their views on whether it's affordability, whether it's focused on game features, whether it's focused on spend and these kind of things. And you have the trade body, the BGC, which is, groups by far the largest number of operators on the market, and it's trying to help feed that process. But if you extend that now to Europe, it's not that different. I mean, we've heard from colleagues here already, right? The focus on advertising, and that's constantly in debate. And I think that's by far the biggest change across all European markets. Add to that, I think, an increased focus on sponsorship as well. If you think of Spain, if you think of the Netherlands, even of the UK itself, fines, whether it's B2B licensing, whether it's deposit limits. So you have these constant changes coming in. And that's why I started by saying that at the end of the day, the public policy objectives have not changed. And are these changes coming in genuinely meeting those objectives? I think where we as an industry come in, what we're saying is, fine, it's an innovative market, constantly there are regulatory challenges. What we're saying is you want to see policy that is developed based on more sound evidence out there and research based, on a wide plethora of stakeholders. I think that is what we would, as an industry, are arguing for. I think I could leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. Thank you very much for this overview. Indeed, yes, it's been striking how the discourse in the UK has significantly changed over the years, from a fairly liberal licensing system and liberal approach to gambling as a leisure activity, towards notably a very heavy focus on advertising restrictions and sponsorship restrictions that we can observe. If you allow, I will say a few words also on Switzerland, where things are happening currently regarding casino gaming and therefore also poker gaming. Switzerland currently has a licensing window open until end of October of this year, where existing casinos and also new casino ventures can submit their application until end of October, and thereby expressing their interest in receiving a license for 20 years. So the present licenses are running out at the end of 2024, and the present application is then for licenses that would run from 2025 to 2044, that is for 20 years. The government defined, in view of that process, 23 zones in Switzerland. For each zone, one casino can be licensed. You have to know that so far 21 casinos have existed in Switzerland, a very high density actually of casinos, given a population of approximately 8 million. So you have a situation where the government is looking at potentially increasing the casino number to 23. It normally should not be more at the end of this process, because the government said that it would be maximum one casino per each of these 23 zones. Given the tight system in Switzerland between land-based and online, that is, that only land-based casinos can offer online casino games, the application is typically focused on the land-based operations, but it's optional for the applicant whether they also want to apply for the online operations. And if a casino does not apply, or if an applicant does not apply for the online operations now, in this process, that can be done anytime afterwards. So it's all anchored, if you want, so primarily at the land-based businesses. It will be interesting to see how many new applicants there will be. There are quite a good number of new applicants. There are also 2 new zones where there haven't been a casino so far. One is in the area of Lausanne, so one of the largest cities, second largest city in French-speaking part, on the shores of Lake Lausanne, Lake Geneva. And the other zone is in Winterthur, which is also one of the largest cities just north of Zurich, essentially. So we will see how many applicants we will have at the end of the day, and there will be some competition, some good competition in some of these zones, without any doubt. So this is a brief take on Switzerland. I think I've spoken about Liechtenstein before. Liechtenstein, I will maybe say a few more things next time. What I can mention is that amidst the very steep growth of casinos in Liechtenstein that is hardly to stop, we have seen the first casino actually closing. So there seems to be some saturation of casino gambling in the small jurisdiction of Liechtenstein, where one casino of Casino Austria actually did see its doors closing. At the same time, new casinos are still opening in Liechtenstein. So I hope this has given a very brief overview. And with that, I'd like to revisit one of the points you have mentioned, and I'll maybe change the the order of things by starting with Odette. You mentioned that the taxation has changed quite a bit through this summer in Romania, notably that the withdrawal tax has been raised from 1% to 3%, and that the GGR tax is now at 23%. You did mention that it's possible that this issue would go to court. Odette, I'm not sure whether you're actually with us, because I can't see you for the moment.
Yes, I'm here. I don't know, I had some. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. Yes, we can all see you now. Wonderful. I was wondering what would be the basis, in Romania to bring this issue to court of law. Is the argument that some of these changes have no legal grounds to actually introduce them? Is it argued that it could be unconstitutional, or what would be the foundation?
If we are trying to say that this was against the constitution, we try to find any other arguments to go in the court. But if you ask me, in the court we cannot win in the court. But it can be an issue, I told you, to the competition, because it's not it's against the competition legislation, because in this moment we have this difference between land-based and retail. And on this, I think we have all the arguments. So we can ask what I'm thinking, maybe in the parliament, to ask not to be the same taxation, but maybe to be between for everybody, to be like 20 for everybody, to not be 18 or 23 for separate, but to be 20% from GGR for everybody. This we will try to propose to them and to see with all the arguments what we can have. So from my experience with the parliament and with the government, I think it will be easier to change the parliament comparing with to win something, a case in the court or something like this, because this will be like a long time, but on the parliament can be changed in 2 or maximum 3 months to have in force the new modification. But nobody knows, because on the political side also in Romania is very sensitive period, like everywhere in this time. We have not like a majority somewhere, we have not majority in the commission, in the parliament, and nobody decide to go in one way or in another way. So we cannot say that in the end we will be approve our proposal, but we will try everything what we can do, even in court, even in a parliament. And also we are thinking to be like, we'll tell them that also we are in the court with this situation. Maybe this can be one more argument in the parliament.
Okay, thank you very much, Odette. We actually have a question, and I think it's good to clarify from Anna-Marie. We have a question whether it's correct that in Romania land-based taxes is then currently lower than online taxes.
This I said. It is 18 and in online is 23.
18 versus 23, right?
Exactly.
Both based on GGR?
Based on GGR for sport betting.
Okay. And the withdrawal tax that was raised to 3%, does this only regard online, or is the requirement to have also in the land-based a similar account where you do withdrawals?
Yeah, this requirement is for sport betting in retail and for online for all activity, for all gambling activity. What I consider that is not right is like an exception for the slot. So if you are playing on the slot, the players have not any taxation until 66,000, so around 11,000 euro. What never will be, this price is very rare and it will not be case. So this also is not right, because the same player, if he's going to play slot machine in the retail, is not pay any taxation in the retail. If he's going on the platform to play on the online, on the casino, on the slot, he will pay the taxation 3% until 10,000 RON.
Okay, thank you very much. So if I may wrap up probably the legal arguments would be based on competition law and the prohibition of discrimination, which is a fundamental principle, I assume, also under Romanian law. It certainly is under the general framework of EU law in England.
Yeah, what I'm very worried about this discussion, what will be in the parliament in autumn, will be because we'll open this discussion about the gambling. And I don't know if you all the time we have the issue, very sensitive issue about advertising. Because we have in Romania is not so strict, I can say, because you can have banners everywhere. We have advertising on the TV after 11 o'clock. So I'm scared a little bit about this discussion and we'll see what will be about one deputy to come with the proposal about advertising, because also we saw what is happened in Italy. So they have also some example from Europe. I will try to avoid this discussion, but I'm prepared also for this to be on the table.
Thank you, Odette. I'm very of our time. That's why I'm moving forward to Joerg. You mentioned that the new super regulator, keenly awaited throughout Europe, in Germany, is taking its function up in beginning of 2023 in principle. However, they already have enforcement competences indeed in place. Maybe you could tell us a bit about their present approach. Which enforcement means do they use? Do they use administrative measures? That would be, for instance, blocking measures or similar cease and desist letters, or do they use also criminal law measures, bringing charges towards operators? If you could enlighten us a bit on this.
Well, the answer is everything that is possible. So they really take it serious, and certainly they will apply administrative measures such as interdiction letters, but that is a weak one. That doesn't really work, as we know from the experience over all these years. So it's IP blocking, which is considered, and payment blocking, of course, and they've always started to practice it. But something that is new is they want to establish a special bureau of a public prosecutor who is focusing on criminal gaming, on unlicensed gaming. So that should be criminal sanctions, criminal investigations, and they want to establish that sort of authority within the territory of Saxony-Anhalt, where the regulator is based with its authority. That is something which may work better than everything else in the past, at least across the European Union, because you can enforce criminal sanctions across the European Union. Outside may be different, but there is need to strengthen the enforcement efforts because our restriction, our licensing regime is quite restrictive. So to combat the black market, you need to have some sort of power to acquire your own customers, and you stay safe, be competitive. There are some changes.
This prosecutor aspect is highly interesting because if I see this correctly, it's an interlender authority, right? It's not a federal authority, but an interlender authority. So typically, when you have a situation, Anfangsverdacht, nicht the situation of criminal law, it would be the prosecutor of the specific land that would open proceedings, right? But so they seem to create an interlender prosecutor.
Well, we're talking about the online gaming space, and these offerings are available all over Germany. So in particular, every public prosecutor can take over and start investigation. The idea here is it should be a cooperation between the regulator and the public prosecutor, and to build up expertise, know-how, what is gaming, what is online and illegal gaming, and what does a license mean. I think that is the execution part of the enforcement, and they started to take over this responsibility on 1st of June. The other thing that goes with the change of the legal responsibilities is that when they really start supervising the whole industry, all verticals, regulating, licensing, and even assessment of the developments, This is the end of a group of people which is called Gambling Committee. The German word is Glücksspielkollegium. This is a group of people that currently exists. These are leading regulators of every German state. So 15 heads of regulatory offices of every German state. And they have the final saying on all important decisions, which are going to be made by the current authorities. So if someone wants to grant a license to an operator, even the state administrative authority or the regional council in Darmstadt, who are conducting this proceeding and reviewing all the documents, they cannot grant this license without the final approval of the gambling committee. And we learned that's sometimes really impossible because they need a 3/3 majority. And since Germany comes from a history where we have states opposing against liberalization of gaming, against regulation. And then we have the more liberal states like Schleswig-Holstein and Hesse who've got this experience and see how good it can be. It is really hard to get that sort of opinion. That caused many, many delays in the past. That's, I think, the main answer why we still haven't concluded the application proceedings and there's still applications pending. This is over then, and this authority or this group will be replaced by an administrative board, advising the new regulator, also making decisions. But this is a group where we don't have regulators. These are state chancellors of the German lenders. The reason why we need such a group is for constitutional reasons. The basic law in Germany, since, as you correctly mentioned, this is not a federal office, not a federal authority, there must be some participation, some influence secured for the lenders in Germany, and that's by way of establishing this new group of people.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe a question also on the relicensing of the 34 sports betting operators. Do you see this as a rather low hurdle for these 34 to take, or are there bigger new requests in the way?
No, I mean, the change in law, meaning the introduction of the new interstate treaty a year ago in July 21, all these new requirements were automatically imposed. So they are following, they're compliant. And since they're proved evidence by granting the first license that they are really capable and willing to operate in a licensing regime, I think it's more a formal application. You need to complete a few documents, a few contents, you need to adjust them, and you need to provide updated documents for some of the representatives. And if you've done this all completely, I think it should be fine. Of course, the regulator will look at the offerings if you did everything really compliant and if there's no illegal gaming involved. But if that is not the case, you can expect to get your license. So
by contrast, if you're looking to get a new casino operation license online, that's a whole different story, right?
That's different. You can only get a casino license, meaning a virtual slot machine license, if you fulfilled some compliance requirements in the past. Since there was a black, or let's call it a gray market in Germany, the regulator started to come up with an idea called this transitional regime in 2020 and said, from now on, we want to guide those operators who are willing to operate under license and who will apply for a license and who will meet the requirements of then future regulation, meaning the current interstate treaty. We will factually tolerate their offerings and deem them reliable, so they can get a license. And everybody else who is not in time adjusting his offerings and not applying for a license shortly after 1st of July 2021 is out of the game, basically. Probably you could see there was a time frame, maybe end of September or so, where you could apply for a license. If someone is coming to apply for a license now who was offering gaming without a license in Germany, that is critical. If it's a startup who never served customers in Germany so far, that is not a problem. You can always apply for a license.
Yeah.
There are some challenges, if you give me 2 minutes, probably, because that is something I think people are interested in. Apart from getting a license or not getting a license, we have these issues with the betting program for sports betting. The regional council, influenced by the Glücksspielkollegium, the gambling committee, came up with a list of permissible bet types, a catalog, some months ago. And we could say it is a reducing of the standard offerings of an operator around 70%. Plus minus 70%. So it's not attractive, it's not competitive, and it went beyond what the interstate treaty provided on regulation. So there is discussions, there's court cases pending, litigation. Probably there might be a settlement possible between the regulators and the industry. I doubt it from my perspective, because I think we will never reach a level which is acceptable and competitive. So that is something, it's just now happening. There are discussions and court proceedings. This is something we should monitor. The same goes with the LUGAS data file system. LUGAS is a service system which applies to the whole industry. It is for avoiding parallel playing. That's an easy one. It's for monitoring the limits. We have deposit limits, which is on a cross-operator base. So that should function. And also, it's a safe server technology. And that is obviously delayed in terms of technical functionality. We're still waiting for technical guidelines. A draft is known, but probably we are facing a delay here. And finally, with the deposit limits, the issue is for sports betting, there could be an exemption granted by the regional council. They had 2 tiers. The standard limit is 1,000, could rise up to 1,000, 10,000 and 30,000. You need to reapply for that. But for virtual games, virtual slot machines, it's only 1,000. And only next year, an exemption is possible upon request and can be granted by the new joint gaming authority. And we have no idea when and how this will take place. Until then, we have sort of split wallet systems, which are complicated, and it doesn't really work cross-operator based. So a lot of things to be fixed in the near future.
Many things to be fixed, yeah. Often there are good intentions in the beginning by politicians, but then people have to figure out how to overcome practical limitations, right? I realize we have one more question, Joerg, from the audience. Question is regards geolocation and also regards, to the limitation of black market. So what about geolocation? For instance, geocomply.com. Is this something Germany is looking at, or are there data protection issues in between?
Well, I should think the enforcement tool for regulators is IP blocking to make sure you don't have access. If you can bypass this and circumvent it, that's another story. Geolocation is a technical method which has been used in Germany when we had the licensing regime in Schleswig-Holstein, meaning only 1 out of 16 German states offered licenses for online casinos. And these are still valid until the operators get new ones. And so if they or if others wanted to operate in Germany, and they could focus their offerings on one state and make sure by way of geolocalization, for instance, that they are not offering the games, not taking customers from Hamburg or other surrounded states in Germany. Or also the same is with international operators licensed in Malta. The German state never accepted the Maltese license. So they said, we are fine with your offerings outside of Germany, but by way of geolocalization, you can exclude us. And if there were administrative court proceedings based on interdiction letters, let's say the state of Bavaria issued an interdiction letter to an operator, this could only be valid within the territory of Bavaria, because they don't have any competence for other German states. So I said, we only care for Bavaria. Use geolocalization, make sure you're not targeting customers in Bavaria. What you do in the rest of Germany, it's not my cup of tea.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joerg.
You're welcome.
With that, I will also briefly revisit the Baltics. Andrius, you mentioned, of course, the quite significant changes in taxation. Now there is also a one-off licensing fee reaching from 100,000 to potentially 1 million euros. However, that's not the end of the story, right? There is still 20% GGR ongoing tax afterwards. Yes. That is correct. I was wondering in regards to other requirements, now considering that the land-based requirement was dropped, yes, which obviously, my view at least, pretty clearly was arguably not in line with EU law. What are the remaining requirements that somehow relate to the territory of Lithuania? I can give an example. So, for instance, having a safety vault that is mirroring all player data on the territory of Lithuania could be such a requirement relating to Lithuania. Do you see that?
Okay, and I get your point. Basically, the territorial requirements in terms of what the operators should do or should comply in terms of, setting up their operations in Lithuania, from Lithuania, these are, off the scope. Everything's, basically everything's, allowed, even in terms of the servers. If it's in the European Union, everything's, allowed. But that's only the, so you don't have a safe, you don't have a
vault requirement.
So you don't have an incorporation of the platform into the tax authority like they have in Estonia, in Italy, and in Belarus, and stuff like that, or like in Spain via a third party safe providers, nor a national integration into the tax authority, nor through the third party. So in Lithuania and in Latvia, these requirements are off scope. In Estonia, it was always there. In Estonia, the platform had always, always needed to be integrated into the tax authority system for automated reporting and stuff. So this was always there. But when it comes to the regional things in terms of Lithuania, which is the opposite to Estonia, the Lithuanian regulator strictly forbids acceptance of the bets from outside of Lithuania. So basically, even the random and not targeted audience from outside of Lithuania is not allowed. So it was not, it's not in the Gambling Act itself. It began with the immigrants, the Lithuanian immigrants elsewhere, targeting the UK immigrant Lithuanians, the Scandinavian Lithuanians and stuff like that. So it evolved into a written position of the regulator that is prohibited, and now the first operator received a fine for that. So this is...
Andrius, that's an interesting point when you say that is not expressly foreseen in the law, to actually ring fence the market in that sense. Typically, we would think as lawyers that based on fundamental principles of criminal law, you cannot just impose criminal fines if there's no legal basis for it.
It's not criminal. Basically,
are they of administrative nature?
Yes, administrative nature. Everything is actually in Lithuania. Everything related to gambling, let's say compliance, is actually an administrative part, except of AML part, which can go forward to the criminal part. One of the interesting parts, again, in terms of the territorial perspective, there was a case, a very recent case, that the player, the Lithuanian player based in Lithuania, has won tremendous amounts from the foreign operators, unlicensed operators. So the funds were seized, and it went to the budget of Lithuania. It's really interesting how would that evolved in the higher courts, but due to the fact that the player died, I think committed suicide or something like that, it didn't went further from the first instance, because the first instance is the first instance. You can't really rely on as a clear position of
it's not stable case law.
So it's really interesting how would that for me as a gambling lawyer, that would have been tremendous of tremendous importance to the market.
Thank you, Andrius. I have one last question before we move to Charmaine. Yes. We have a question from the audience. Is there a B2B supplier license available in Lithuania?
So B2B supplier license is not available in Lithuania. nor in Latvia, nor in Estonia. In Latvia, only the live studios are subject.
And that has an obvious historical reason.
Yeah, so if we keep apart the live studios business, the B2B suppliers, such as poker suppliers, slot providers and stuff like that, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they don't have a B2B supply license. It's only based on the certification.
Wonderful. And the live dealer B2B possibility in Latvia certainly relates to evolution, I suppose, at the time.
Well, now it's a bit of a different times. It remains there. And and there are, and to be honest, there are new live studios coming up, slowly, every year, at least, one new studio is licensed in Latvia. So it exists, this framework exists, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I want to make sure we can also revisit a couple of points that Charmaine raised, and it's really striking how the discourse has changed in the UK. There has also been a lot of talk about this infamous white paper, but we have also kind of lost track about the government developments in the UK. People come and go, so this white paper has been delayed. What do you really expect from it, if anything, Charmaine? How do you suspect it to be?
Not an easy question. I think it will depend a little bit now on the direction, as I said earlier, that the new people coming in will give from the top, whether they will decide to say, let's start with the basis and revisit the original intentions behind the review in 2019. Do we go with that document? Do we review the responses? Because let's not forget, they got a lot of responses from a wide plethora of stakeholders, and whether they would take the time to see the evidence that has proposed. And I think that's quite relevant, because there have been a number of studies carried out on various topical items. We've seen numbers, figures quoted in parliamentary debate, so to speak, not necessarily all within context. Some often not to be lifted out of context. What I would not want to see, I would say, is one particular recent study, which was so-called the Lancet study, so to say, had several measures in there, and all of them, or the large majority, are really draconian, if you like, because it was talking about ban on advertising, ban on sponsorship, I've written them down, ban on in-play betting, yearly increases in taxes, curfews for websites, source of fund checks for vulnerable players and bank statements, and it's a really long list. So you'd hope that if there are any those type of proposals put forward, that somebody's going to sit down and take the time to say, why are we doing this ultimately? And you go back to the player. And one thing that we have been working on in the UK as an industry through the trade body, but not uniquely in the UK, and also specifically as Playtech, is to say, listen, ultimately the public policy objectives is to protect the players. You want gambling to be fun, but you want all players to be protected, but protected not in a one-size-fits-all measure, which is what deposit limits do, and which is what even advertising bans do. What you want is to use today data and technology, make use of data and technology, and put the focus on the individual players. I would have liked to say Holland is a really nice example, because they put in their law, one of the first probably, to put in their law a clear focus on the use of behavioral analytics to identify at-risk play as early as possible before you have a problem. And that is quite, I think, spot on, because you're really targeting the individual. But yesterday, I believe, in a panel, a conference elsewhere, the Dutch regulator announced the reality of deposit limits kicking in. And to me, it begs the question, why a year later is Holland already determining that they have such, dare I say, failures from, I don't know, the industry, from operators, that they have to immediately, without a proper review, a year later say, like, okay, we're introducing deposit limits. And let's not forget that in Holland, they're talking about advertising restrictions kicking in, sponsorships. So, you really go back and say, is it just a spillover of a debate across markets that the regulators have to be seen to be doing something? Or is there anyone genuinely saying, these are the reports coming in from industry, these are the complaints coming in from players, from health treatment centers that force us to really revisit the basis of our policy objectives? And I think that merits really proper consideration.
Yes, thank you very much, Charmaine. I think you're making some very valid points. It's really quite astonishing seeing these far-reaching claims in the UK. If we contrast the debate, say, only a decade ago, it was very different. What I can say is I see throughout Europe all kind of heavy advertisement restrictions debated, and also other restrictions. Switzerland seems like an island in that debate, so that's not something we can observe regarding Switzerland currently. There are two main grounds to prohibit, or two kind of advertisements that are prohibited by law in Switzerland. One is if the advertising is overly aggressive, so you're getting cold calls and the like, and the other is if the advertisement is deceptive, so trying to delude you into a perception of things that actually is not representing the reality. I would say these are principles that are probably in place in many jurisdictions, and these are sound principles. There's nothing to be raised against them. So thank you very much. I think this has been a rich and luscious round of indeed updates from different jurisdictions, more than people represented. We are privileged to have, and I would like to thank all my colleagues, some of which I will certainly see soon at the next conference. And thank you very much. And with this, I'm handing over to Sultan.